Oh, there's so much value that it can add. For example, you can make sure you're prepared to have a spare parts inventory. If you know 3 months in advance that a part of your equipment is starting to degrade, then you can plan to have its replacement ready to go for when you perform maintenance. We have people that have eliminated planned maintenance on the assets that they're monitoring with Senseye, so they no longer send people on around to put hands on a machine unnecessarily.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined by an old favourite, old in the sense that you've been on the podcast many times, I should say, Natalie Kurgan. So welcome back, Natalie. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
That's a strange intro, isn't it? But we'll roll with it. We'll roll with it. It's fine. Now, today, so we welcome you back. And it was actually you who approached me, which is always nice. So it's not just me coming up with these topics as I hear them, but it was you who came to me. So I guess before we go into the topic, which we're talking about when predictive maintenance is and isn't right for your plant, which is a very important question, actually. I'm surprised we haven't covered it in depth so far. But I guess before we go into that, Natalie, it'd be great maybe to remind people of your role at Siemens and with the Senseye.
Sure. So I was actually part of Senseye pre-Siemens, and I worked in delivery. So I was delivering Senseye directly to customers. And post integration with Siemens, I am now the head of delivery for all of the Americas. So I train our regional colleagues to deliver Senseye, and I coordinate efforts, and I consult, and I still work with some customers. So I've got a lot of experience at this point into what makes a good and a bad PDM project.
Exactly. Perfect for this discussion today. But I'll put the question back to you, like I said, because you came to me with the topic. Do you remember why, I'll say do you remember because it was a little while back, but do you remember why this topic sort of came into your mind? And it's all these projects you're involved in, right? Something sprung from there.
I don't remember exactly why, but it's something that we encounter all the time, is that we end up with deployments in plants where it's just not necessarily the best case scenario for starting with PDM. And then, of course, my role in delivery and in guiding people to deliver whatever the customer thinks that they should get out of the PDM project, we have to deliver that regardless of whether or not it actually makes sense. So that's probably why I came to you.
You came to me to talk it out on the podcast. That's fantastic. But I guess, and I guess it's a lot of that driven because I'm in the marketing side, and I've seen sort of the hype rise in predictive maintenance. Like everyone's talking about it, everyone says they do it. And I guess that's driving a lot of this, right? Like we must do predictive maintenance no matter whether we're ready or not, kind of thing. We just need to do it.
Totally. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I think there's a lot of buzzwords, which we can't get away from because Senseye is a predictive maintenance decision support tool, right? However, I think some of the confusion comes from all these different places are saying that they do predictive maintenance. And when I actually go and look at them, they're actually not all doing predictive maintenance. They might just be doing condition monitoring, which is fine. That's needed too. But now customers might not have the right idea of what PDM actually is. So sometimes they still kind of think it's this magical solution where they're going to just give it their data and the system is going to tell them exactly what is happening with 100% certainty and what maintenance actions they need to go perform, and where there's like no input from a human. That's just not reality. There's too many unknowns for a system like this to just be able to take that amount of control and certainty over the situation. But I think there's also misconceptions around labeling tools themselves as predictive maintenance. Because as you've heard me say before, this is a crusade that I am on, which is that no tool is predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance is a strategy that encompasses many tools and many practices. So Senseye is part of that. It's a very useful part of that. But if you don't embrace the other parts of predictive maintenance as a strategy, you aren't going to succeed.
Yeah, and I guess we consider predictive maintenance isn't a tool, it's more of a strategy. So what, I guess, are the core conditions that make predictive maintenance valuable to a plant if you think of it through that lens instead?
Oh, there's so much value that it can add. For example, you can make sure you're prepared to have a spare parts inventory. If you know 3 months in advance that a part of your equipment is starting to degrade, then you can plan to have its replacement ready to go for when you perform maintenance, just before that 3-month period. We have people that have eliminated planned maintenance on the assets that they're monitoring with Senseye. So they no longer send people on around to put hands on a machine unnecessarily. No longer do people have to go waste their time going to some far reaches of the plant unless they actually have to, as directed by Senseye. So having that visibility allows people to just trust in the system to tell them when they need to perform the work, and they go and they know what needs to be done, so they go and do it. But I think reducing planned maintenance, there's also, of course, the safety aspect. If we are preventing unplanned downtimes, I think unplanned downtimes, like if something goes down in the middle of the night, maybe it's 2:00 in the morning, it's crucial, the whole line gets taken down, you want to get in and fix it as fast as humanly possible. You're a lot more prone to shortcuts and making mistakes that could have safety implications. So those are just 3 off the top of my head, but there's so much benefit to just knowing about the health of your machine rather than just waiting for something to happen.
I don't know if this is a strange question, but are customers actually aware of all these different benefits? I mean, they might be aware of something like, reducing downtime, for example, but are they aware of sort of the broad benefits rather than just bucketing it in, it's just another digital thing, another digital project or initiative we should get off the ground, but with no real idea of what they're trying to solve with it?
I don't know if they're aware of that from the onset, but it's definitely a big part of our conversations pretty much as soon as I start working with them. So as soon as it gets sold, we start these conversations, not just around what data do we need and how do we get your data, but it's around what value are you going to get from this? Because everybody's different. And some of those value indicators are really hard to quantify. How do you quantify safety? I don't know, but it's something that should be taken into account.
Exactly. And I guess you mentioned there as well, like data as well, but, it encompasses so many different things of predictive maintenance projects. And whether it's technically, whether it's, the organisation or whether it's a cultural thing. So with those 3 key areas in mind, so what are the warning signs that something's not quite in alignment for a predictive maintenance project?
Well, it always comes down to the organizational structure, I would say, of whoever's implementing Senseye. So I can give you some examples of times when it's been very difficult, and it usually comes down to lack of support. I have a customer I'm working with right now who is a really good example because quite literally the CEO is in the calls during the case reviews with me all the way down to the maintainer level. Tell me about another company that has that level of support from the top and the bottom all at once. So anything that needs to get done, they get it done. So I think what can happen is people get this tool, they feed their data in, and they don't realize that you have to do something. When Senseye tells you something, you have to make the decision. It cannot make it for you. So you need somebody who understands how to look at data, and you need somebody that understands and has a workflow in place to actually do something about it. So let's say we do spot something, part of the aspects of predictive maintenance is we are predicting. So it could be something that's 6 months down the line. It's going to be a problem for you. What are you going to do about it right now? Okay, so Senseye tells you, what is your workflow? If you don't have a workflow, okay, let's make sure we have a spare part inventory. Let's check our plant maintenance schedule. Let's plan for a scheduled downtime, during this event to make sure that we can address this way before it's an actual problem. Let's change operations to, slow it down or something to baby the machine to make sure it can last to a different plan maintenance. So you need somebody like a maintenance planner involved that can help make these decisions. So there's a whole workflow involved that needs to be in place. And at this point, I've been rambling and I don't remember the original question.
No, that's okay. Rambling's fine on a podcast in the right place, Natalie, don't worry. But what I was going to lead that to, that's an incredible example of the CEO. I've never heard of that. It's great. What sort of role do they play on the call? Because, some people might imagine a CEO's overbearing and wants to, with other people on the call might feel like all the CEOs here. But what you're saying is that's not the case at all, right? They're just genuinely interested in what's going on.
I could absolutely see what the example you just gave as being a risk because usually, the people maybe in a steering committee aren't so technically minded and they don't understand quite so well. But I would say the CEO might be the person that understands the best. I think he was the main driver for getting Senseye. He's the one that was the main person excited about it. So there were other people in the call asking questions about things that were actually out of scope for this project, for this deployment. And he would step in and say, yeah, that's not on our path right now. When we scale, we'll talk about that. But he's an engineer, so he understands what he's looking at, and he's helping. I would raise something. I said, okay, this case is indicating something. Your machine is in trouble. What are you going to do about it? And for a moment, his team was silent, and he stepped in and said, "Come on, guys, what are we going to do about it?" And I'm like, "This is great."
Wow. Yeah, I mean, because we're always saying on this podcast, right, that you need multiple levels of stakeholders involved, but to have that sort of involvement from the CEO is just just something else, right? Driving it.
It's bizarre, but it's great. I'll take it.
Exactly. And I mean, if we're talking about, because we're talking today about what isn't, whether PDM's right or isn't right for a plant. So who's involved in that decision on we just want a plant, because we know it can roll out much further than that. But if we just talk about a plant itself, who'd be involved in those case reviews or some of the earlier discussions about it?
So the critical thing when we get involved with a customer is we need what we call a champion. This champion needs to really want Senseye. They need to be interested in it. They need to be able to see the benefit that Senseye will bring to them in terms of efficiency and savings. So they need to care about it. They also need to be technically minded. They need to understand their machines. They need to be able to read the data and the charts, because again, some level of competency is needed in data analysis. You don't have to be an expert data scientist, but you need to be able to look at a time series and understand what the data shown might be indicating for your machine. So a champion has to kind of encompass all of those, and they need to be also proactive and have channels of communication open to, like I said, follow up after the case. How is Senseye embedded in your workflow, your predictive maintenance strategy? So they need to be able to go talk to operations and have some amount of control there to be able to maybe change how the machine is operated, or they need to talk to the maintenance planner. So they need to have some amount of authority. So I would say that champion is critical. If we don't have a champion, we have a really hard time, because we need one person who is taking charge and saying, I'm owning this. Eventually we get end users in who are just regular users, but we need that initial admin, that champion from the beginning.
And again, we talked about champions a lot, but I think it's interesting because you brought up the situation with the CEO joining the call. So is the champion usually someone in a certain type of role, or can it vary? Like with a CEO, maybe becomes the champion in a rare case.
I would say CEOs are generally not our champions. They might be our leading sponsor, which I think is this case. He's just more technically minded than most, probably. I would say champion, my ideal champion is a reliability engineer. Sometimes people don't have those. Actually, the customer I'm talking about right now doesn't have a reliability engineer, but they found somebody who, if they decided to have that role, I think it would be this person.
And that just proves it's a per organization thing, right? It could be the CEO, it could be reliability engineer, it could be someone in maintenance. But the idea is you need someone who's proactive, who's going to not just see the information, but actually connect with the relevant people, and so people take action on the information that's actually been provided.
And to make the decisions, make decisions on what needs to happen. We actually have, it almost looks like a job posting for like the required characteristics of a person to be in the role of a champion and an end user. So we actually have those in our help center to help organizations find the right people within themselves to fill those roles.
Yeah, because that's interesting as well. So they might not even if they see it on paper, these are the roles, they might not even understand themselves within the organization who's right. Again, it's clear that it's not just a cookie cutter approach to every organization, right?
Right. Well, sometimes they come to me and they say, okay, who is our champion? And I say, I can't answer that for you, but here's kind of what this person needs to have the characteristics of. So we can start there.
In terms of examples where, another way to look at it, I guess, is when everything looks right on paper. So, the right organization, you got a champion, then it just doesn't work for whatever reason. I mean, do you have any examples in that area where, everything could look set up for real greatness, but it just doesn't quite work out that way?
That's a good question. I think it's so, I've said this already before in this call even, but it's so important to have support from the bottom and the top, because if you have, let's say you have a great champion and they're doing their thing, and then they learn everything, the ins and outs of Senseye, and then they leave their job or they move, and then no one else cares enough to take it up. What do you do? So I think that's where the support from a sponsor is so important, because you can rely on your champion a lot, but you need support in case something changes organizationally. And I would also say, so from the people point of view, that's always the struggle. But from the assets and the data point of view, of course, that could be our other area where things don't quite work out. Maybe the right assets were not chosen in the beginning. Maybe the assets chosen are super complicated, so complicated that maybe the champion can't make sense of what Senseye is trying to tell them about the changes in their data. Maybe they don't have the right data, or low data quality, or anything to do with data. You need to Senseye will give you what you put into it. So if you put in terrible quality data or not enough of it, it's not going to be able to tell you magical results. So of course that's always a factor.
Yeah, let's go into more technical side in terms of data and connectivity. So that, I guess there must be like a minimum amount that's required to get something up and running. I'm going to presume a little bit that it's underestimated what's actually required, maybe, or maybe you could answer that rather than me presuming. So.
I would say that everybody's least favorite answer is it depends. Yeah. I think as long as expectations are manageable or reasonable. So for example, let's take something really simple, a motor. Let's say all you have is motor current, and that's the only thing you can get out of it. We can start with that. We can, but are we going to detect bearing problems if all we have is motor current? No. we can detect electrical problems. Maybe not all of them, but it's a place to start. But what we find is, we onboard some data like that, and we might have a customer that says, well, the motor went down. Why didn't you detect it? And we say, well, why did it go down? And they say, oh, because of this thing that happened downstream, or, this bearing was crushed or something. And it's like, how could we possibly detect that? I'm looking at the data with my eyes. I see nothing to indicate any sort of degradation. So if you want to detect that, we need more data, but that's like an expectation that has to be managed from the first conversation with a customer.
And it links back to what you were saying earlier, Natalie, about predictive maintenance being some magic box you could apply and it'll just spot anything and everything, even like you said in those examples, even without the right data to actually spot that, right? So it can only do so much, right, with the data and everything else it's put into it.
Right. So one of the things I like to say is Senseye Predictive Maintenance cannot predict unpredictable events. Which sounds so obvious when I put it that way, but sometimes something might happen instantaneously and Senseye doesn't detect it because it was an instantaneous failure. There was no degradation. It just, maybe a meteorite fell out of the sky and landed on your motor. Like, how could we predict that?
And actually, maybe we could explore that a little bit more in terms of these misconceptions, because I think, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but what other sort of misconceptions about predictive maintenance are there, which you hear in conversations?
I think one of the ones, especially now that we have Copilot is so helpful in giving its best guess as to what's happening on the machine, why the case was raised. But some of the misconceptions are that Copilot just knows everything from the beginning. Doesn't. It starts with some good information. It has like a baseline database of knowledge. But if you don't tell it stuff, if the data changes on a machine suddenly and you don't tell it, oh yeah, I went out and replaced it. I replaced this whole component. And you don't tell Senseye that, how can it possibly know? So it's going to tell you its best guess based on what it knows, but you have to give it more context. So anytime you interfere with the machine, if something changes, you have to go tell it that so it can learn.
Has the introduction of generative AI and Copilot technology, has that made that whole it's magic thing, even more so? A bit of expectations raised even higher, if that's even possible.
I think so. I do think Gen AI is kind of magic. So I'm going to need somebody who knows more about it than I do to tell me it's not. But
fair enough.
just in the world, it seems like, oh my God, this thing is incredible. But yeah, so we'll see still some misconceptions, not so much about predictive maintenance, but about Senseye in particular, is that the Senseye workflow is that a case is raised, That's your notification that something has changed. It's going to give you its best guess into what is going on in the condition of the machine based on information you've told it previously or closed other cases that were similar. But you have to come back and tell it what you've found. So if a case is raised and you don't like it and you close the case and you take no follow-up action. So you close the case and you say, I'm grumpy. I don't like this case. Don't open it again. You have not told anyone what about the case you don't like. And just telling Senseye, I don't like this case, there are like more than a dozen different parameters that could be the reason you don't like the case. Is it because this was moving up? Was it not moving up fast enough? Was the baseline shift not big enough? Was it going down and you only care if it's going up? How can the system know, right? So you have to come back and tell somebody what you didn't like. And when I say somebody, I mean a real human being. You can raise a ticket in Senseye and say, hey, I got a case on a decreasing temperature. I only care when temperature is going up. Can you tune the algorithms? We can say, sure. And we can go do that. But the app isn't going to do that on its own because there's way too much. You need a human involved in that. There's just too many different parameters that it could possibly be. So I'd say that's a big misconception, specifically with Senseye, is that you close a case and you say you're grumpy about it, and then you get the same case opening a week later. It's because you didn't do anything about it. You have to take that follow-up action to get the result you want.
It's funny. I have a sort of related story. Not someone being grumpy with a case, but actually, when I interviewed one of our colleagues, Jordan, on the podcast, he was talking about how a customer was reluctant to let us know that Senseye had opened a case that wasn't relevant or whatever. And it's a similar, it's a similar result. If you don't tell us or let anyone know, then it will keep appearing. Right. And that was the sort of point he was saying to them. We want to know this stuff. We need to know this stuff because it's good for you. It's good for us. It's good, for your deployment of Senseye. Right. I guess as we sort of come to a close, I wanted to think about, because we talked a lot about why predictive maintenance might be right for an organization or a plant, or not right. But if a plant decides and they know in their mind, right, we're not ready for predictive maintenance right now, but maybe they want to be in the near future or medium term. So what steps they need to take to sort of get to that stage? And we're talking very generally here, of course.
That's a really great question. I would say the first question that they have to be able to answer is, why do they think predictive maintenance will help them? What do they want to get out of it? We start with a lot of people that have no idea of what sort of savings they want to try and achieve. They don't know their KPIs. So it's interesting to me to invest in something without knowing really why, or because there's so much buzz around it. You want to get involved in it, but you don't actually know how it can help you. So to get started and try to understand that, you can review your maintenance logs. You can figure out which assets are continuously causing you problems and how much those problems are costing in whatever KPIs. Maybe it's in downtime, maybe it's in product loss, maybe it's in environmental, fees or something, labor, any of that sort of stuff. Maybe you want to be able to better manage your spare parts inventory. Maybe you want to reduce planned maintenance. So get an idea of what your starting values are for all of those things. Because if you don't know where you're starting, it's really hard to track value with Senseye or with any PDM solution. So I would say start there and figure out, starting with the maintenance logs, which assets are causing problems, and then go into seeing, okay, what data do we have available on those assets? Will we need additional sensing? And that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, exactly. So then you at least have the big picture before then choosing, when and how to approach predictive maintenance at the right time.
And then I would say finding that champion, finding someone who, if you have a reliability engineer, that would be a great person. But if not, finding that person who is interested and has some level of competency with data and the machines.
Or your CEO, as it happens.
CEO, apparently.
You can get them on board, even better. No, that's fantastic. So at the beginning of, before we sort of start recording, I'll let you know very last minute that we've introduced a lightning round to our recent podcast episode. So you're no exception, Natalie. So it's really about the first thing that comes into your head, right?
Okay, I'm ready.
So if you're ready, so we have 3 questions. So the first one is, one thing that customers always underestimate.
How difficult it is to get started, to get data in.
Fantastic.
Even if we provide the whole solution, it takes time.
Absolutely. And one step you should never skip in the process in deploying predictive maintenance.
Determine your KPIs.
And finally, one myth you wish would disappear.
That Senseye's a magic black box.
Fantastic. Awesome. No, thank you. Really, really good. So yeah, now that brings us to the end. We've covered a lot of topics, probably other topics we could have covered, but of course we could always record again at some point. But it's lovely to have you back on the podcast, Natalie. Thanks for taking part.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you everyone out there for listening wherever you are, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.